They want you to picture the Dark Ages as a time of ignorant, mud-caked peasants, and 99% of people believe it. They believe your ancestors were stupid, barely surviving, incapable of complex thought. This is the greatest lie ever told, a historical cover-up designed to hide a horrifying truth. Knowledge wasn't lost. It was purged. You're a farmer in the year 1250. The cold seeps through the wattle and daub walls of your hut, a damp chill that settles deep in your bones. You wake not to birdsong, but to a sound that makes the hair on your arm stand up. The symbol connects the woman who knows how to heal the body with the forgotten place that once kept it clean. Suddenly, you realize you are not alone in your doubt. Someone else remembers. Someone else is leaving a map. But a map to what? And what happens to those who dare to follow it? He told you how the temperature of a red-hot iron can be subtly altered by how long the bellows are pumped just before the test. It is not a trial of faith. It is a trial of allegiances, and Alaric has none in this room. The priest's voice booms, echoing off the stone, a litany of divine power and righteous fury. You don't hear the words. You hear the mechanism of a trap closing. Alaric's crime was not blasphemy, not theft. His crime was knowledge. You watch as a single pure beam of sunlight, filtered through a tiny aperture high in the southern wall, creeps across the floor. The sound of your own breathing seems impossibly loud in the echoing space. The soft, rhythmic scrape of your worn leather shoes on the stone is the only percussion to the frantic beat of your heart. At the precise moment of midday on the winter solstice, the beam illuminates a small brass inlay in the floor. A mark whose meaning is known only to a secret few, a solar clock, a meridian line. You remember the forbidden text you read by guttering candlelight, a letter from a 14th century bishop discovered centuries later in the darkest corner of the Vatican archives. He doesn't speak of saving a soul. He speaks of perpetual reclusion as a highly effective tool for managing dynastic embarrassments. It was a secret prison system, sanctioned and sanctified by the church itself. You look at the rapt faces in the crowd, and you see the same willful ignorance we practice today. We have our own benevolent labels, don't we? Re-education camps, protective custody, enhanced interrogation. Your eyes, now sharpened by this terrible knowledge, scan the fresco not as a believer, but as a target. You ignore the grand theatrical tortures. You search for the fine print, and there, in the darkest corner, so small you've missed it 100 times, you see it. A minor demon, almost an afterthought in the grand chaos, is hunched over a sinner's back. It isn't using a whip or a flame. In its claws, it holds a tiny, sharp chisel, and with meticulous care, it is carving a familiar geometric symbol into the man's flesh. Our symbol. The official story they feed you about the Great Famine is a lie. You know this because you are the one who held the 700-year-old proof in your hands, right before they made you bury it again. You can still feel the damp chill of the trench, a wound cut deep into the green English countryside. It's 4 a.m. The generator hums, casting a cold, white light that makes the shadows of your team look like ghosts. You're on your knees, the wet clay seeping through your trousers. It opens with a formula, a recipe for something the church believed it had scoured from the face of the earth forever. It's a rhythmic, clandestine scraping coming from your neighbor's hut, a sound the parish priest warns is the devil's work. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. The official story is that your village is one bad harvest from starvation, utterly dependent on the charity of your Lord. But what they don't want you to know is that your neighbor isn't praying. They tell you God decides if you starve. But the truth, the one they burn people for knowing, is that men who claim to speak for God are the ones who decide. 99% of people believe the three-field system was a brilliant medieval invention that saved Europe. The official story. What they don't want you to know is that it was a leash designed to keep you weak, hungry, and dependent. You stand in the Lord's field, and the sun is a merciless hammer. He was the one who quietly taught you and a few others the secret of the three-field rotation, letting one field lie fallow to regain its strength. It meant more food, stronger children, a life less tethered to the whims of the Lord's granary. It was a small act of freedom, and freedom is the most dangerous heresy of all. They have accused him of cursing the baron's livestock, a convenient lie. 2 guards seize Alaric's arms. He doesn't struggle, an act of staggering intellectual rebellion, disguised as a miracle. The men who built this were not mere laborers. They were master masons, a guild whose secrets were more valuable and more dangerous than gold. They passed down forbidden knowledge, geometry, engineering, and astronomy, inherited from pagan philosophers and Arab scholars, from master to apprentice, cloaked in ritual and oath. They learned that the earth was not the center of all things. They discovered that the clumsy, church-approved models of the cosmos were a lie, a comfortable story for children. We still build holy walls around our darkest secrets and call them righteous. Suddenly, the scratching stops. The silence that follows is louder, more terrifying than the noise it replaced. You hold your breath, your ears still tuned to the stone. Did her fingernails finally wear down to the bone? Did she finally collapse from exhaustion? The crowd on the other side is oblivious, their soft prayers continuing. The message is suddenly no longer for the herd. It's for you. This is what happens to those in the network. The air smells of rain and ancient, disturbed earth, a smell like an open tomb. Everyone is told the years between 1315 and 1317 were a non-stop funeral procession. A time of biblical rain, rotted crops, and a skeletal hunger so profound that parents were said to have eaten their own children. God's punishment, the church called it. A climate catastrophe, the historians call it now. Both narratives serve the same purpose, to make the suffering seem inevitable, an act of God or nature, with no one to blame. The book creaks open. The vellum under your fingers is rough, alive. A faint, earthy scent of oak gall ink rises from the pages. But it's the script that stops your breath. This is not the cold, formal Latin of the church. It's a coded vernacular, a secret grammar, the language of the people. As your mind races, deciphering the spidery text, the symbols begin to unlock, and then you see it. The final, world-shattering truth. The Dark Ages were a lie. Knowledge was never lost. Civilization didn't collapse. It was a controlled demolition. He's consulting a forbidden star chart, etched onto slate, to determine the one perfect day to plant a resilient, high-yield wheat the church has outlawed as unnatural. This knowledge wasn't a miracle. It was a secret. New archaeological evidence, from carbon-dated seed caches to microscopic analysis of peasant tools, proves a sophisticated underground system of knowledge sharing existed. A grassroots resistance against enforced ignorance. The church and the nobility waged a silent war, not against barbarism, but against information itself. They burned books on agriculture and medicine, and then they burned the people who remembered what was in them. The earth is not a living thing. It's a cracked gray scab, groaning under the weight of the sky. The heat bakes the dust into a fine powder that coats your tongue and grinds between your teeth. The wheat stalks around you are thin, anemic, their heads bowed not in ripeness, but in exhaustion. This is the fruit of the great three-field system. One field for wheat, one for beans, and one left fallow, dead, to rest. A third of your world, deliberately barren. It feels less like farming and more like a punishment. But then you see it. His eyes find yours in the crowd for a fleeting second, and in them you see not guilt, but a terrifying resignation. They force his arm, bare to the elbow, over the cauldron. The water bubbles and hisses, an impatient serpent. This is the moment where God is supposed to intervene. But God is silent. There is only the priest, the Baron's reeve standing by the door with a smirk, and the sound of your own heart hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. They plunge his arm into the water. And so, while they took the church's money to build monuments to that lie, they embedded the truth in the very fabric of their creation. It's a silent, two-fingered salute to the dogma that would see them burned. This entire cathedral is a library of the damned, a textbook of celestial mechanics hiding in the one place no one would ever think to look. You crane your neck back, the vertebrae cracking softly, until your gaze settles on the great rose window dominating the western wall, a kaleidoscope of sapphire, ruby, and gold. You inch your way back toward the nave, your eyes fixed on the small, shadowed opening of the food slot at the base of the cell, barely wide enough for a piece of bread or a cup of water. Something moves in the darkness, a flicker of white. A small, wadded piece of cloth is pushed out, falling silently onto the dusty flagstones. No one else seems to notice. Your blood runs cold. You move quickly, feigning a stumble, and your hand closes around it. It's rough-spun linen, damp and strangely warm. They called the forest cursed for a reason, but the demons they warned you about wore human skin. You take the step. The mud of the Lord's path releases your worn leather shoe with a soft, sucking sound, and you are swallowed by the shadows. The priest's words echo in your head, a litany of fear hammered into you since birth. Stay on the path. The woods are home to the unbaptized, the soulless, the beastmen who hunger for the flesh of the faithful. But what they don't want you to know, what 99% of the world will never learn, is that some people didn't starve. Right here, under your fingertips, is the evidence. Your trowel scrapes against something solid. Not stone, not bone, wood. Dark, heavy, and impossibly preserved. It's the door to a granary. As your team carefully works it open, the sound it makes isn't a creak, but a low, resonant groan. The sound of a lung breathing its first breath in centuries. And then you see it. Inside, illuminated by your headlamp, is a river of gold. Wheat. The church and the new feudal lords, in a secret, unholy alliance, systematically dismantled the ancient world's mind. They built a firewall around knowledge, severing an entire people from their own history of medicine, science, and self-governance. The reason is as simple as it is monstrous: to create a new world order built on dependency. A populace that cannot heal itself must pray for the Church's miracles. A populace that cannot feed itself must beg for the Lord's charity. A populace that has forgotten its own power will never, ever question authority. This was the greatest reset in human history. They label inconvenient truths as heresy, silence those who share them, and create a dependent populace that believes only the official narrative. The scraping from your neighbor's hut stops. Silence hangs in the pre-dawn air, thick with unspoken fear. You know his secret, but you've also seen the cart that takes people like him away, a cart that never comes back. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Tucked away near a crumbling stone wall, hidden from the path the reeve walks, is a patch of impossible green. It's an act of rebellion so profound it makes your breath catch. It's clover, not growing wild, but planted in a complex swirling pattern that feels ancient and alive. You kneel. Your fingers, calloused and split from the rough-hewn plow, touch a leaf. It's cool, soft, and impossibly vibrant. The sound of the parched earth cracking under your knee is a stark contrast to the life humming in this small sanctuary. This isn't just a plant, it's forbidden knowledge. A scream is torn from his throat, a sound that is not quite human. It is the sound of flesh boiling, of sinew cooking on the bone. It fills every inch of the church, a sound that will live under your floorboards and in the thatch of your roof for years to come. They pull him back, his arm a blistering, ruined thing. The priest wraps it in sanctified linen, his movements calm and practiced. The verdict will come in 3 days, he proclaims. If the wound is clean and healing, he is innocent. If it festers, he is guilty. To the faithful, it is the eye of God, but you see it for what it truly is now. The intricate stone tracery, the web that holds the divine light, isn't just decoration. The interlocking circles, the 12 primary spokes, the geometric progressions, it's a diagram, a map. It's an orrery, a model of a sun-centered system, hidden in the sacred geometry the church itself celebrates, but does not truly understand. And then, a cold dread washes over you as your mind connects the pattern. As you palm it, you feel a sticky wetness. You look down. Your fingers are stained with a dark brownish red. Blood. Her blood. Unfurling it in the shadows behind a stone pillar, you see the message she left. It is not a word. It is a symbol, smeared into the fabric with a bloody finger. A perfect geometric shape, a circle intersected by a triangle, with a single stark line drawn through its center. It's the same symbol you saw carved into the wood of the alchemist's forbidden book. Your heart beats a frantic rhythm against your ribs, a drum calling out your trespass to whatever lurks in the gloom. The air here is different. It's 10 degrees colder, thick with the smell of wet earth, rotting leaves, and something else, something wild and clean. Light filters through the dense canopy in hazy, cathedral-like shafts, illuminating dancing dust motes. You were told this was the devil's domain, but it feels more sacred than the cold. Damp church where you kneel every Sunday. Thousands upon thousands of kernels, dry and whole. Not a speck of mold, not a hint of rot. In a year when the rest of Europe was eating dogs and dirt, this village had a surplus. This is the historical equivalent of finding a working iPhone at the Battle of Hastings. It's impossible, and it's only the beginning. Days later, you unearth a plow. You run your gloved hand over the blade. The design is all wrong. A war on information itself. The geometric symbol you've been chasing wasn't just a mark of resistance. It was a schematic. A design for a decentralized, resilient network to keep knowledge alive. A peer-to-peer system for human survival. This is the secret 99% of people never learn. Those we were taught to pity as ignorant peasants were quiet heroes in a centuries-long information war, preserving the light, not in grand libraries, but in whispered recipes. In the sacred geometry of their planting, in the very stones of their cathedrals. This ancient conspiracy is the blueprint for today. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Let's begin, and live the life they never got to finish. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. This is a strain of nitrogen-fixing clover, a secret passed down not in books, but in the hush of a grandfather's last words to his grandson. It's a page from a forgotten world. The priests say the old books were burned for heresy, for their pagan spells. A convenient lie, but you know the truth. They will bury in church records for 800 years. The records, when they are finally unsealed, will show what you already know in your gut. The conviction rate for these trials is over 90%. The festering is a near certainty. It's the perfect system. It allows the Lord and the Church to legally eliminate an inconvenient voice and seize his property, splitting the land, the tools, the very grain in his silo between them. It's a form of theft so profound it is mistaken itself for holiness. The specific arrangement of the central panels, the way the outer rings intersect with the inner ones, it's the symbol, the secret sigil of the network, the one you saw crudely carved into a loose stone in a forgotten scriptorium. Here, it is rendered impossibly large, built into the very house of the enemy, a declaration of truth in the heart of the lie. It's the ultimate act of hiding in plain sight. It's like a band of rebels embedding the blueprint for a revolution in the source code of the king's public website. A breathtaking, terrifying act of defiance. The same one the old woman in the woods whispered was a ward against the silent watchers. Her secret is no longer contained within stone walls. It is here, in your hand, warm and wet and terrifying. It's a key, or a map, or a death sentence. As you quickly hide the cloth in your tunic, you feel a sudden chill that has nothing to do with the church. From across the cavernous space, through the flickering forest of candles, you see a pair of eyes watching you. This is the secret 99% of your world will never learn, because the fear is more comfortable than the truth. They believe the stories of goblins and monstrous wolves, because the real monster is the one they cannot see, the one that tells them where to live, what to believe, and how much of their harvest belongs to another man. The stories are not a warning, they are a wall, a form of ancient propaganda designed to protect the system's most valuable resources. Your body and your obedience. The curve of the moldboard, the angle of the share, it's a self-scouring steel plow, a design that history insists wasn't invented until the 1830s. 200 years too early. This wasn't just a tool. It was a technological miracle that would have allowed them to turn over the heavy, wet clay that doomed everyone else. The lab confirms the metal is period correct, but the knowledge to forge it this way simply shouldn't have existed. It's a secret that shatters the very concept of the Dark Ages. And then there are the people themselves. They no longer need to burn books when they can control the algorithms that decide what you see. They no longer need to preach of hellfire when they can manufacture a daily crisis to keep you scared and compliant. They sanitize history, control information, and label any dissenting knowledge a dangerous conspiracy. The tactics have evolved, but the goal is identical. The medieval peasant hiding a page of Roman medicine is the ancestor of the modern citizen using a VPN to access a banned website. The war never ended. They lied about the past for a reason. The most dangerous person in your village isn't the soldier with the rusted sword or the priest with fire in his eyes. It's the woman who knows how to heal you. From your window, a sliver of grimy, warped glass, you watch them drag Ilara from her cottage. The air, usually thick with wood smoke and damp earth, carries a different scent. The sweet, sharp, almost sickly smell of the poultice she was making. You can almost feel its grainy warmth on your own skin. The crushed willow bark and yarrow she was preparing for your son's fever. They don't want you to know that among the scrolls of banished gods were Roman-era texts on agronomy, books like Columella's De Re Rustica, which detailed irrigation that could make a desert bloom, soil enrichment that laughed at the idea of a fallow field, and pest control that didn't rely on prayer. Knowledge that could make every peasant a king of his own land. It's the medieval equivalent of burying the plans for clean, limitless energy to protect the men who sell the oil. Control the food, and you control the soul. An independent man is a dangerous man. You realize with a sickening clarity that this system will never die. Centuries from now, they will do the same thing with a piece of paper instead of a pot of boiling water, seizing a man's home and livelihood with no proof of a crime, another profitable lie dressed up as law. They drag Alaric away, his screams fading to whimpers. The crowd shuffles out, murmuring about God's terrible justice. They don't see the reeve clapping the priest on the shoulder. They don't see the transaction, but you do. How many other cathedrals across Christendom hold these silent heresies? How many prayers are rising to the vaulted ceilings of unread scientific texts? Your mind reels with the scale of it, the centuries-long conspiracy of knowledge against power. You tear your gaze away from the window, your revelation a dangerous weight in your gut. Your eyes scan the crowd, the sea of bowed, unknowing heads. And then you see him, standing by a massive pillar, almost lost in the gloom. A man in the simple robes of a papal inquisitor is watching you. They belong to a man in the simple brown robes of a friar. But there is nothing simple or holy in his gaze. He knows what you have. Her secret is now your burden, and you are no longer alone in the dark. The deep woods are the last free place on the continent, and the powerful need you to believe it is hell on earth. You push deeper. Every snap of a twig sounds like a judgment. But the fear is slowly being replaced by a defiant wonder. You see a fox, its russet coat a flash of fire in the green twilight, and it only watches you with intelligent eyes before vanishing. You hear the call of a bird you've never heard in the village fields. This forest is not dead or haunted. It's brutally, beautifully alive. Then you hear it. Your osteoarchaeologist, a woman who speaks the language of bone, pulls you aside. Her face is pale in the tense, flickering light. She shows you the femurs, the skulls, the delicate ribs of a child. There are no Harris lines, she whispers, her voice cracking. No growth arrest lines. No signs of scurvy or rickets. These people weren't surviving. They were thriving. They were taller, stronger, and healthier than the nobles who supposedly ruled over them. They lived through the greatest famine in a millennium and never missed a meal. How? Because they knew something forbidden. So the only question left is, what else are they lying about now? They call her a witch. The nobility in their damp castles call her a criminal. What they don't want you to know is that she was the only doctor your village ever had. Your throat tightens, the metallic taste of fear coating your tongue. You hear the wet sound of rotting thatch dripping from the eaves, a slow, steady clock marking the seconds of her undoing. Just yesterday, the priest stood in the muddy square and spoke of God's divine plan, of sickness as a test of faith. His cure? Prayer. Penance. A hungry man is a compliant one. Recent soil analysis, a kind of magic you can't even comprehend, would one day find the pollen from this very clover in fields labeled unproductive for centuries. Proof. A quiet, desperate war of knowledge, fought with seeds and whispers, right under their iron-fisted rule. A flicker of movement pulls your eyes up. Across the field, another farmer, a man named Thomas, whose face is a roadmap of droughts and early frosts, catches your eye. His gaze drops to the clover at your feet, then back to you. You see the silencing of another mind that dared to think for itself. And as the heavy church door groans shut, sealing the sacred space that has just witnessed a motor, a cold dread seeps into your bones, a chill the brazier cannot touch. Because you were Alaric's best student, and you carry the same dangerous secret of the soil in your head. He isn't looking up at the beautiful light. He isn't listening to the sermon. His sharp, intelligent eyes are fixed directly on your face and on the dawning, forbidden understanding he sees there. He knows you've just learned to read the secret language of the stone, and in his gaze there is no piety, only calculation. The church told you alchemy was the devil's work, a blasphemous, greedy quest to turn worthless lead into gold. They lied. That story was the most successful cover-up of the Middle Ages, a perfect smokescreen designed to hide a truth so dangerous it had to be buried under the guise of heresy. You are sitting in the scriptorium, a place of supposed holiness. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax, old ink, and the cold, damp breath of ancient stone. Your breath ghosts in the weak halo of a single candle. A sound that does not belong to nature, a rhythmic, metallic thwack, thwack, thwack. It's the sound of an axe splitting wood. Your breath catches. You creep forward, moving from the shadow of one ancient oak to the next, your fingernails digging into the rough, damp bark. And then you see it. It's not a camp of savages. It's a village, woven into the very fabric of the forest. Huts with living roofs of moss and turf are built into the side of a gentle hill, nearly invisible. They practiced a form of intensive, rotational agriculture the church had declared heretical, a system that enriched the soil instead of stripping it. They had tools born of a science that was supposed to be centuries away. They were not victims of their time. They were masters of it. That's when you see the symbol. At first, it's just a scratch on the granary door. Then you find it etched into the steel of the impossible plow blade. Then, as you excavate a cottage, you feel your blood run cold. And for the wealthy, the glint of the lancet for bloodletting. 99% of people don't know the chilling truth buried in forgotten parish records. Church-sanctioned bloodletting had a mortality rate over 60%. It was a cure with a mortality rate that physicians today would call a war crime. Yet Ilara's remedies, whispered from mother to daughter across 1,000 unrecorded years, had a success rate you could see with your own eyes. In the children who survived winter coughs, the men who returned to the fields after deep cuts didn't fester. Her crime wasn't magic. It was efficacy. For a heart-stopping second, the world shrinks to the space between you. The buzzing of a fly sounds like a war drum. This is it, the moment of betrayal or brotherhood. He could scream for the reeve, and you'd be flogged, or worse, for practicing earth sorcery. Instead, he does something else. With the worn leather of his boot, he traces a quick, furtive shape in the dust. A geometric symbol, a familiar pattern of interlocking lines, gone in a breath, scuffed away into nothing. The church told you the famine was God's will, a penance for your sins. But 99% of people who starved in the Middle Ages never knew the truth. The famine was a lie, a weapon of control. The air in the woods is so cold it feels sharp in your lungs. Every snap of a twig under your boot sounds like a judgment. Your heart hammers a frantic rhythm against your ribs, a drumbeat of terror only you can hear. The church preached piety for 1,000 years, their sermons carved in stone and fear. But what archaeologists found in the filth beneath their abbeys tells a forbidden story of human desire they tried to erase from history forever. You are sitting on a bench of cold, unforgiving oak, your back aching against the stone pillar. The priest's voice is a hammer from the pulpit, striking the air with words like fornication, carnality, and damnation. Your job is simple. Copy the Word of God, letter by agonizing letter, until your eyes burn and your fingers lock into a claw. But the silence in here isn't holy. It's heavy. It's the silence of a secret being kept. Leaning back to stretch a knot from your spine, your elbow knocks against the tall oak shelf behind you. It doesn't just rattle, it gives. A low, hollow thump echoes in the chamber, a sound that doesn't belong. Your heart seizes in your chest. You glance at the door, listening for the soft-soled shoes of the abbot. Nothing. A thin, clever channel of stone diverts a stream to turn a small water wheel, which seems to be grinding grain. Smoke, almost white and odorless from burning dry hardwood, curls lazily from hidden chimneys. You see people. A man with a long gray beard meticulously sharpens a tool. 2 children, their laughter muffled by the trees, chase a chicken. A woman sits at a simple loom, her hands moving with a fluid grace that speaks of a lifetime of practice. They are not monsters. They are fugitives. There it is again, carved into the hearthstone, the very heart of the home. The same symbol in every single house. A key, not a normal key, but a circle intersected by 3 lines. The universal key. This wasn't just a village. It was a node, a secret island of knowledge and prosperity in an ocean of death. They were part of a network, a hidden web of survivors who refused to bow to the official narrative of despair. And that is why it had to be erased. The call comes on a burner phone. You realize the terrifying logic of it all. A population terrified of disease, death, and damnation will cling to the very institutions that promise salvation for a price. A healthy, self-sufficient populace, however, is difficult to control. Suppressing folk remedies wasn't about saving souls. It was a medieval blueprint for maintaining a monopoly on hope. A strategy so successful, it echoes in the pharmaceutical scandals of your own time, where cheap, effective treatments are buried by billion-dollar campaigns for patented drugs. You've seen that symbol before, scratched near the door of the woman who knows which herbs will stop a fever, painted faintly on the stones of the old well. It's not just a sign for healers, it's a mark, a password for those who remember, those who know how to make the earth truly live. You have just been invited into a secret that could feed a village or get every last one of you hanged. This is not a path. It is a thread of mud and fear you follow into the blackest heart of the forest, far from the Lord's watchful eyes. The moon is a sliver of bone, offering no comfort, only casting shadows that writhe like demons. You clutch the single, worn coin in your fist, its metal sweating against your palm. It is everything you have left. A shape detaches itself from an ancient oak, a whisper of a man. The raven flies hungry, he hisses, the password tasting of rot and desperation on his breath. He thunders about the sanctity of the marital bed, a place reserved only for the sacred duty of creation, not for the demonic sin of pleasure. The air is thick with the smell of damp wool, unwashed bodies, and the cloying sweetness of incense, meant to mask the stench of 100 fearful sinners. Your knuckles are white where you grip the splintered wood. You feel the weight of his gaze, a holy surveillance that misses nothing. But what they don't want you to know is that this sermon has almost nothing to do with God. Driven by a fear that tastes like methyl in your mouth, you push again, gently. A section of the bookshelf, cunningly carved, swings inward, revealing a dark, dust-choked cavity. Inside is not a silver crucifix or a saint's relic. It's a book, small, bound in stained, unmarked leather. It feels wrong in your hands, too plain, too functional. You carry it back to your small desk, the illegal discovery, a hot coal against your skin. Runaway serfs, heretics who refused to burn, families who still honored the old ways and would not bow to the cross. They are ghosts, erased from the official story. This is the truth that modern archaeology is now uncovering in the deep forests of Europe, the physical proof of a silent, sprawling resistance that historians tried to bury under folklore. This is what power does when it cannot persuade. It rebrands dissent as monstrous. It's a timeless strategy, a clipped, anonymous voice from a ministry you've never heard of. It's not a discussion, it's an order. The findings are a matter of national security. The official report will list the site as inconclusive. All field notes are to be turned over. The site is to be reburied for long-term preservation. You know what that means. It's the modern-day equivalent of a book burning, a digital assassination of the truth. They are killing this village for a second time. Historians have hidden this for centuries, but the truth is that hundreds of medical texts filled with generations of herbal wisdom weren't just lost. They were systematically destroyed, labeled heretical to erase any alternative to the authority of the church. As the guards shove Ilara past your door, her eyes, for a fleeting, terrifying second, lock with yours. There is no plea for help. There is only a message. Her mud-caked hand discreetly lifts. her thumb brushing against the heavy oak of your doorframe. You look from the symbol in the dust to the green, living heart of the clover, and you realize the harvest you're fighting for isn't just about grain, it's about truth. And now, you are no longer just a farmer. You are a conspirator. You force the response from your own dry throat, but the mouse finds the grain. He nods, a flick of his chin, and melts back into the darkness. You are permitted to pass. You push through a curtain of wet branches, and the world changes. The clearing is not empty. It's alive with a silent, ghostly industry. Dozens of figures move in the dappled moonlight, their faces lost in the shadows of deep hoods. You watch the priest's eyes flicker for a moment toward the local baron, a man whose vast lands are secured only by the purity of his daughter's impending marriage. This control, this obsession with who sleeps with whom, isn't about saving your soul. It's about controlling property. It's about ensuring an heir is legitimate, that a land grant passes to the correct family, that a political alliance sealed by marriage is not undone by a moment of passion. The Church's power is built on the architecture of inheritance, and your body, your desire, is a dangerous variable in their equation. The pages are not vellum, but a rougher paper, and they crackle as you open them, the sound as loud as a scream in the dead quiet. This is no Bible. The script is a frantic, coded scroll, filled with symbols you've only seen in forbidden texts. But as you stare, your mind, trained to decipher ancient languages, begins to find the pattern. This isn't a spellbook, it's a laboratory journal. And here is the secret 99% of people will never know. Alchemy was the hidden bunker where science survived the Dark Ages. They declare a place cursed to keep you from finding a sanctuary, just as a modern state might declare an emergency to clear a public square of protest, painting the participants as a danger to the very society they are trying to fix. The tools are more sophisticated now, but the lie is the same. You are so absorbed in this stunning revelation that you don't notice the old woman until she is standing just a few feet away. You flinch, expecting a shout, a knife. As the bulldozers move in, pushing sterile topsoil over the hearthstones and the full granaries, you feel a rage so pure it's almost silent. They are burying the proof that our ancestors weren't all helpless subjects, that they had their own secrets, their own science, their own networks of resistance. They are burying the evidence that the darkness of the Dark Ages was, in many places, a carefully manufactured lie, designed to consolidate power. The village is gone again, but the symbol, the universal key, is burned into your mind. You saw what they tried to hide. You watch, heart hammering against your ribs as she touches a small geometric symbol carved into the wood, something you've seen 100 times and dismissed as a carpenter's mark or a childish doodle. But the way she touches it, a silent communion of wood and flesh, tells you otherwise. You hear the soft, wet rasp of her thumbnail, tracing the grooves of the shape, a circle, bisected by a single line, with 3 dots beneath it. It's not decoration. It's a secret, passed in plain sight. The most powerful weapon in this world isn't a sword. It's a sentence you can't understand. You stand in the village square, a cold wind cutting through your damp wool tunic, and you feel the weight of that weapon pressing down on you. The Lord's steward, a man whose soft hands have never known a day of labor, reads from a scroll. His voice is a monotonous drone, a string of Latin words that mean less than the buzzing of a fly to you. and every other soul shivering here. This isn't an accident. There are no loud calls, no haggling, just the hushed language of gestures, the rustle of burlap, the faint, forbidden clink of currency that isn't the Lord's. This is the secret that keeps your village from turning to bone and dust. This is the economy of the damned. What the priests and the nobles don't want anyone to know is that while they lock their granaries and preach of heavenly rewards for earthly suffering, a massive, sophisticated network thrives right under their noses. This is the real reason millions survived. They didn't pray harder. They risked everything. The sermon ends. You shuffle out into the gray afternoon, the priest's condemnation still ringing in your ears. The street is a river of mud and refuse. But as you pass the town's only inn, you hear a sound that feels like a blasphemy. The faint, muffled eruption of female laughter from a second-story room, quickly shushed. It's the sound of a secret world, one that exists in defiance of every rule just preached from the pulpit. 99% of people today imagine a medieval world of absolute obedience to religious law. The quest for gold was a brilliant deception, a funding proposal pitched to foolish, wealthy patrons to finance research the church would have burned them for. These monks weren't praying for miracles. They were creating them through method, observation, and experimentation. You trace a passage with a trembling finger. A diagram of a glass contraption, an alembic, is labeled not with an incantation, but with notes on distilling aqua vitae. You realize with a sickening lurch they are not talking about an elixir for immortality. But she only looks at you with eyes the color of moss, set in a face as wrinkled and intricate as tree bark. There is no suspicion in her gaze, only a deep, unnerving understanding. A knowing smile touches her lips. Around her neck, on a leather cord, hangs an amulet carved from a pale wood. It's a complex, circular design of interlocking lines, a shape you've never seen before. It feels ancient, powerful. She doesn't ask your name or where you came from. Her voice, when she speaks, is like the rustle of dry leaves in autumn. They didn't just bury a village. They tried to bury a question that could unravel everything. And now, you are the only one left who knows where to dig. The mob turns the corner, their jeers fading, leaving only the oppressive silence and the smell of her abandoned medicine. Your gaze is fixed on the symbol. It feels hot to the touch, alive with a forbidden energy. What did it mean? And who else in this village of fearful, watching eyes was part of this hidden network of healers? Her capture wasn't an end. You understand now. It was a catalyst. Her knowledge is no longer in her hands. It is carved into your door. What they don't want you to know is that this language barrier is a wall, built brick by incomprehensible brick, to keep you in your place. They've made the language of God and the language of the law the same, ensuring that you can be condemned in both worlds without ever understanding the charge. It's the 800-year-old ancestor of the dense, impenetrable legalese in a modern contract, the digital terms and conditions you scroll through without reading. It is a tool designed not to communicate, but to control. You understand the steward's tone, though. Your eyes adjust, taking in the impossible sight. A hulking man unloads sacks of wheat from a cart with no markings, grain that smells rich and clean, stolen from a surplus the Lord swore didn't exist. Two women, their faces thin but their eyes sharp, are bartering with a man for a block of salt, its whiteness glowing in the gloom. Salt, smuggled 100 miles from a coastal town you've only heard of in stories. A treasure that can keep meat from rotting through the winter. It's worth more than silver. The truth, hidden in suppressed court records and whispered confessions, is that human nature can never be legislated away. It can only be forced underground. In hidden groves, on nights when the moon is full, the old ways persist. They call it witchcraft, a word designed to poison the well of memory. But it's just the wisdom of your grandmother and hers before that. Rituals that celebrate the turning of the seasons, the fertility of the earth, and the desires of the body, not as a sin to be punished, but as a life force to be honored. They are describing the purification of alcohol, a substance that could cleanse a wound and stop the putrefaction that steals so many lives. It is a secret that could save more souls than any prayer. This is the medieval version of a secret military project, hidden in plain sight, funded by a lie. They were documenting the properties of acids that could test the purity of metals, the foundation of metallurgy. They were grinding herbs and minerals, not for potions, but for pharmacology, testing their effects with a rigor that defied the era's superstition. "You are not the first to come seeking," she says, her gaze fixed on something deep inside you. "But the freedom you look for is not here." Her smile fades, replaced by an expression of profound gravity. "It is what follows you that you must understand." 3 people knew the secret that could have saved the world. What they don't want you to know is that 2 of them were murdered for it. The sound is the first thing that hits you. A deep, groaning scrape of stone on stone that seems to tear the silence of the last 700 years. It's a sound that hasn't been heard since the Black Death was just a rumor from the East. You are there, beneath the altar of the great cathedral, as the forgotten slab is levered away. The air that rushes out is not holy, and the men who took her will soon be looking for who she passed it to. It is the sound of a cage door locking. But that night, the world changes. You push through the heavy oak door of the tavern, and the air that hits you is thick with the smell of wood smoke, sweat, and spilled ale. Here, the walls don't have ears, they have memories. The droning Latin of the square is gone, replaced by a language that lives and breathes, a tapestry of your local dialect woven with something more. They call it cant, a secret tongue, a river of meaning flowing beneath the surface of common speech. In another corner, a smith with arms like tree trunks lays out his wares on a dark cloth. Iron plowshares, sharp knives, sturdy nails. Not the brittle, overpriced junk sold at the official market, but real tools forged in a hidden smithy. Tools that mean independence. Every transaction you witness is an act of treason. Every sack of grain, a declaration of war against the feudal system designed to keep you starving, weak, and powerless. The church built its cathedrals on top of these sacred places, hoping the weight of stone would crush the memory. But roots run deeper than foundations. The most damning evidence, the proof they can no longer deny, wasn't found in a forbidden book. It was found in the dirt. Recent analysis of medieval cesspits, the garbage dumps and latrines of castles and towns, has uncovered the physical proof of this rebellion. Buried among the fish bones and broken pottery, scientists have found the seeds of pennyroyal, wild carrot, and silphium, plants known for centuries as powerful contraceptives and abortifacients. They weren't chasing a fantasy. They were preserving the scientific method itself, disguised as the very magic the church sought to destroy. It's a modern conspiracy played out 1,000 years ago, proving that the thirst for knowledge has always been the most dangerous heresy of all. Your fingernail scrapes against an embossed symbol on the final page. You hold it closer to the guttering flame, the wax dripping a slow, steady rhythm onto the wood. Like a clock ticking towards your damnation. The symbol is a key, intricate and beautiful, woven from geometric shapes and planetary signs. The most terrifying weapon of the Middle Ages isn't the knight's gleaming sword. It's the one the nobility tried to bury for a century, the one they passed laws against, the secret they prayed you would never learn. It's in your hands right now. The air is cold, thick with the smell of damp earth and wood smoke from a distant cottage. You stand in a hidden clearing, surrounded by ancient oaks whose branches claw at the gray sky. This is a forbidden place. To be here, to do this, is an act of rebellion. It is stale and dead, thick with the dust of forgotten time and the metallic taste of a secret kept too long. Your lantern flame shivers, casting dancing, monstrous shadows on the walls of the hidden chamber. In the center of the suffocating dark is a single stone pedestal, and upon it, a book. To understand the book, you must first understand the blood that sealed its pages. You have to see the monk, Thomas, in his candle-lit scriptorium. The most powerful weapon of the medieval church wasn't the sword or even the cross. The secret they buried was far more insidious. It was the sewer. You can smell the city from a mile away. It's not a background scent. It's a physical presence, a suffocating blanket woven from human waste, the sweet rot of discarded food, and the metallic tang of disease. You pull your thin wool cloak tighter around your face, but it's useless. The stench clings to your clothes, seeps into your skin, lids in the back of your throat. The men at the corner table aren't just complaining about the harvest. When one says the gray goose flies north tonight, he's not talking about a bird. He's warning that the reeve is making his rounds near the old mill. A woman laughing with the tavern keeper mentions her cousin from the coast is feeling unwell, and you know a traveling dissenter, a Lollard perhaps, needs a safe place to sleep. 99% of people, then and now, would hear only the grunting of simpletons, the ramblings of the uneducated. That's the lie they buried this secret under. This is the direct ancestor of every forbidden market that would ever exist. The hidden exchanges, the cryptocurrency networks, systems built by the desperate and the defiant to operate beyond the reach of a controlling power. Historians for centuries believed peasants were helpless victims of circumstance. But a recent archaeological find in a village just like yours, a village recorded as destitute, uncovered a buried cache. It held pottery from 3 different kingdoms and coins minted 100 years apart from a land across the sea. It was proof of what has been hidden from history. You were not victims. This is the fact that shatters the illusion of a pious, submissive populace. They were using botany to fight theology. You can almost hear it now, an echo across the centuries. The ASMR quality scrape of a stone pestle grinding those tiny, forbidden seeds in a back room. A soft, gritty sound that meant freedom for one woman and an eternity in hell if she was caught. It's a hypocrisy as old as power itself. A shadow you see today when those who legislate against personal freedoms are caught violating the very rules they wrote for you. Below it, the author has written in a clear, elegant hand 2 Latin words that make the hair on your neck stand on end. Clavis universalis, the universal key. The journal gives no more answers. it only offers a new, more terrifying question. The key to what? Not gold. Something infinitely more valuable. Something worth risking being burned alive for. The last entry speaks of moving the true furnace to a place of cold sleep and eternal patience. The crypts. A chill that has nothing to do with the night air creeps down your spine. Your instructor, a man whose face is a roadmap of old battles, watches you with eyes that have seen too much. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. The lesson is in the wood itself. You grip the stave of you. It's taller than you are, smooth and powerful, a living thing humming with stored violence. You plant your feet, feeling the mud squelch under your worn leather shoes. Brace yourself against the earth. The instructor's voice is a low rasp, like stones grinding together. You are not pulling the string. You are pushing the world away with the bow. The air is cold enough to make his breath plume, smelling of melting wax and the forbidden scent of old Roman vellum. 99% of people believe monks only copied the Bible. The secret that cost Thomas his life is that he was copying something far more dangerous: forbidden knowledge. Medical texts from Galen, engineering principles from Vitruvius, the science that the Church had systematically buried, labeling it pagan heresy. You can almost hear the whisper scratch of his quill, the ASMR quality scrape of ink flowing into a language of rebellion. They found him slumped over his desk one morning. You walk with a careful, shuffling gait, your eyes fixed on the ground, not out of piety, but to navigate the treacherous river of filth that is your street. A cartwheel has churned the muck into a thick, sucking paste. You hear the wet, obscene squelch as a neighbor pulls his boot free, a sound that has become the city's grim percussion. The priest, his own face plump and clean, told you last Sunday that this suffering is a holy trial. He said cleanliness is a gateway to vanity, a sin of the flesh. But you know the truth. This isn't noise, it's a network. This is the sound of rebellion whispered over the rim of a wooden mug. You feel a vibration through the floorboards. The tavern keeper, a man as wide as a barrel, has tapped his pewter mug on the bar. Not a random clatter, but a rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. A pause hangs in the smoky air. Across the room, a man hunched over his drink, a traveling tinker by the look of his worn leather clothes, subtly lifts his left hand. You were organizers. You were survivors. You spot her across the clearing, the woman you were told to find. Her hood is deeper than the others, her posture still. You approach, your breath catching. You trade your single coin for a small, heavy leather pouch. You don't look inside. You trust. Trust is the only currency that matters here. She takes a piece of white chalk from her sleeve and draws a swift, geometric symbol on the side of a wooden crate filled with dried fish. You feel a jolt run through you, a shock of recognition and terror. The medieval church didn't eliminate human nature. They just made it a crime. They drove it into the shadows, into a world of whispered secrets and desperate remedies. The laughter from the inn fades as you turn down a narrow alley. You clutch a small, cloth-wrapped bundle in your pocket, its contents both a sin and a salvation. But a shadow detaches itself from the wall across the way, the priest's young, sharp-eyed deacon. He saw you leave the herbalist's shop. He doesn't look at you with piety. The book in your hands is just the map. The real treasure and the real danger is buried down below, with the dead. And now you know it's there. You hook 3 fingers around the thick hempen string. It's rough, almost sharp. coated in beeswax that feels sticky and grim. This isn't a gentleman's sport. This is the work of calloused hands. Now you draw. All your weight, all your strength goes into the motion. Your back and shoulder muscles scream in protest. 150 pounds of resistance. The U groans, a low, deep sound of a tree being forced to bend against its will. The official cause was a sudden, violent fever. But what the records conveniently omit are the black stains on his fingertips, an unnatural darkness that looked far more like poison than ink. The knowledge from Thomas's books was not meant for dusty shelves. It was meant to be used. It flowed through a hidden network to a woman named Elara. You can see her now, in a smoke-filled cottage at the edge of town. The air thick with the smell of boiling willow bark and crushed rosemary. She is a midwife, a healer. The Romans, he preached, with their grand bathhouses and heated floors, were pagan hedonists who invited corruption into their souls through the very water they worshipped. Their empire fell, he thundered, because they were too clean, too comfortable, too distracted by the body to prepare the soul for God. You listen and you nod, because what else is there to do? And yet, you remember your grandmother's stories, whispered by the hearth. She spoke of a time when water flowed freely from stone mouths in the town square, water so clean you could drink it without boiling. His thumb and 2 fingers connect for a fleeting second, forming a triangle within a circle, the geometric symbol, a sign of the old ways, a sign of the network. Your heart hammers against your ribs. The sound of it is a frantic drum, a counter-rhythm to the keeper's signal. This is it. Information is moving, not on paper, not in a language the powerful can decode, but in the air, in the beat of a mug, in the shape of a hand. Suddenly, the tavern door creaks open, letting in a slice of the cold night. The symbol is a series of interlocking lines, a perfect, unmistakable shape. It's their universal seal, the logo of this rebellion, a promise of quality and silence. And 99% of the people in this clearing will die without ever knowing that the symbol they use, the one that means life and defiance to them, is an ancient mark, one that has been found carved into the stones of forgotten pagan temples and on the backs of heretical texts burned by the church a century ago. They think they created it, but they are part of something much, much older. He looks at you with a hunter's gaze, hungry for a secret to expose, a soul to condemn. Your secret. And in his eyes, you see the true face of the control they preach about. It was never about God. It has always been about power. And you are in its way. What they don't want you to know is that this art was never meant to save your soul. It was designed to break your spirit. The fresco of hell covers the entire back wall of the church, a masterpiece of calculated terror. The air is cold, thick with the smell of damp stone and the faint, sweet ghost of incense, but you feel only the phantom heat rolling off the painted flames. The artist was a genius, or a monster. You can almost hear the wet, tearing sound as a green-skinned demon peels the flesh from a screaming merchant's bones. The string bites deep into the leather tips on your fingers, the pressure so immense you can feel it in your bones. Your world narrows to a single point, the leather target, stuffed with straw, 200 yards away. It looks impossibly small. You can barely see the crude drawing of a knight's helmet painted on it. This is the secret 99% of people never learn. They see paintings of knights in shining armor and assume that is the image of power. A lie. That armor, forged at incredible expense, is a steel cage waiting to be opened. She is the witch you saw them drag from this very home just weeks after Thomas's death. Her crime was not a pact with the devil. Her crime was knowing that childbed fever could be stopped by washing your hands. Her crime was using poultices that actually drew out infection, saving limbs that priests would have amputated with a prayer and a rusty saw. Heretical knowledge. In a world where suffering was seen as God's will, her mercy was an act of rebellion. She spoke of public halls filled with steam and laughter, where people went not just to wash, but to talk, to live. You look at the crumbling fountain at the end of the alley, its basin choked with moss and refuse, and you try to imagine it. It feels like a fairy tale. 99% of people don't know that this squalor isn't an accident of history, it's a strategy. By deliberately dismantling the advanced hygiene systems of the old world, by casting bathing as a sin, the church engineered the very plagues they then claimed were God's punishment. A stranger stands silhouetted against the dark. He's not a local. His clothes are too fine, but too practical for a nobleman. Every coded conversation in the room dies instantly. The only sound is the low hiss of the fire. The stranger's eyes scan the room, and they don't stop until they land on the tinker. You feel a metallic taste in your mouth, the taste of fear. The network has been activated, but you realize, with a terror that freezes the ale in your gut, that it has also just been seen. The woman finishes her mark, and as she turns, her hood shifts. For a fraction of a second, moonlight catches her face. You see the fresh, raised scar that runs from her eye to her lip. It's the very same scar you saw this morning on the Lord's new housekeeper, the woman who served him his wine, the one who is supposed to be deaf and mute. Your blood turns to ice. They tell you she is a living saint, and from here it is easy to believe. The air in the nave is thick with the scent of beeswax, cold stone, and the sweet, cloying smell of desperate faith. A crowd of believers presses close to the wall of her cell. There murmurs a soft river of sound, pleading for blessings, for cures, for a single word of wisdom to pass through the squint, the small cross-shaped slit in the stone. They see piety. They see sacrifice. You can almost feel the splintering agony as a soul is shattered on a spiked wheel, its limbs twisting at angles God never intended. Bodies boil in black pitch, their mouths open in silent, eternal shrieks. The light from the high, narrow windows catches the painter's glaze, and for a terrifying second, the whole wall seems to writhe. The priest's voice drones on from the pulpit, a monotonous wave of Latin and damnation. And this bow, this is the key. The instructor's hand, scarred and missing a knuckle, adjusts your elbow. Breathe out, he whispers. You feel the faint tremor in your own arms, the metallic taste of adrenaline in your mouth. You let the arrow fly. There is no clean twang. There is a deep, violent thwump hiss, a sound of brutal efficiency as the arrow disappears. A moment later, a sickening thud echoes back from the target. The arrow has not just hit it. It has punched straight through. That plate armor your lord wears? They burned her for the crime of saving lives. Her screams a warning to any who would dare to defy ignorance. It's a pattern we still see today, the powerful attacking those who offer a different truth, branding them as dangerous to disrupt a profitable and controlling narrative. Two were gone, the scholar and the practitioner. Only the architect remained. Guillaume, the master mason, knew they were coming for him. You can feel his desperate urgency as he stands in the half-finished nave of the new cathedral, the scent of wet mortar and raw stone clinging to his clothes. A sick, terrified population is a compliant one. It is a form of biological warfare so total, so absolute, that the victims pray to their attackers for salvation. A cart rumbles past, loaded with barrels of what looks like clear, fresh water and bolts of clean, white linen. It's headed for the monastery on the hill. You watch it go, a bitter taste mixing with the filth in your mouth. You see the abbot sometimes, his robes immaculate, his skin free of the boils and sores that mark almost everyone you know. The priest says God cannot be deceived. You watch the steam rise from the cauldron, and you know he is lying. The heat from the brazier scorches your face, even from 10 paces back. It's a wet, oppressive heat that doesn't warm you, only makes the cold sweat on your neck feel clammy. You are crammed into the nave with the whole village, a herd of unwashed bodies breathing the same stale air, thick with the smell of incense, fear, and damp wool. Your eyes are fixed on Alaric. She sees you staring, and a flicker of something, not recognition, but a cold, terrifying warning, passes through her eyes before she pulls the hood back into place and disappears into the crowd. But what they don't want you to know is that holiness can be the most beautiful cage ever built. You separate yourself from the hopeful. You find a place along the damp outer wall of the church, where the moss grows in the cracks and the wind whispers forgotten names. You press your ear to the stone, the cold seeping into your skin, a shock that travels up your arm. The murmuring of the faithful becomes a dull, distant hum, and beneath it you hear the true prayer being offered inside that cell. It is not a prayer of words. He tells you this is the fate for the disobedient, for the doubter, for the woman who knows too much about herbs, for the man who doesn't give the church its 10th bushel of wheat. His words are the hammer, but the wall is the anvil. It is a perfect, brutal machine of psychological warfare. And this is the secret that would get you burned for speaking it. New historical analysis shows that the graphic intensity of these hellscapes exploded precisely during periods of peasant unrest. The instructor says, his gaze fixed on the pierced target, "It's worthless. At 200 yards, a goose-feathered piece of wood in the hands of a farmer can find its way through steel and into his heart." He looks at you, and for the first time, you see the fire in his eyes. That is why they fear this. This isn't a weapon. It's an argument. It's the end of a prayer. It proves that the blood of a peasant and the blood of a king are the same color when they spill onto the grass. He heard what happened to Alara. He knew their network was broken, but he refused to let their knowledge die. The cathedrals, they'll tell you, are monuments to God, but the masons who built them were keepers of a different faith, a faith in geometry, in physics, in numbers. It was a secret, sacred science passed down in guilds, and Guillaume, in his final days, turned his greatest work into a lockbox. He encoded everything into the floor labyrinth, not as a puzzle for God, but as a cipher for humanity. They preach austerity and sacrifice for the masses, while living in protected luxury. A hypocrisy so profound, it feels like a law of nature. It's the same institutional lie that echoes through the centuries, where leaders demand belt-tightening from the very people they are starving. They have the knowledge, the resources, the means to keep themselves healthy. They simply deny it to you. You reach the crumbling fountain, the ghost of that forgotten age. The water that trickles from it now is a brown, slimy thing, but you stop anyway. He stands alone before the altar, his silhouette stark against the bubbling pot. He is not a heretic, he is a farmer. You remember, just last spring, he helped you mend your fence, his hands calloused but gentle as he showed you how to properly knot the sinew. Now those same hands are trembling. The metallic tang of dread coats your tongue, a taste you know too well. This is not justice, this is theater, and a profitable one at that. 99% of people in this church believe they are about to witness the Almighty render a verdict. The greatest heresies aren't whispered in taverns or written in forbidden books. They are carved in stone, 1,000 feet high and bathed in the light of God. You stand on the cold flagstones of the new cathedral, a cavern of faith built to dwarf men and humble kings. The air is thick with the ghosts of incense and the faint, sweet smell of decay from the crypts below. The priest's sermon drones on, a river of Latin washing over the huddled congregation. But you aren't listening to his words. You are watching the light. It is the rhythmic, frantic sound of fingernails scraping against mortar. A dry, desperate scratching, like a trapped animal trying to claw its way back to the light. It's an ASMR quality sound of pure horror, a sound that tells a story of imprisonment, not devotion. This is the secret 99% of people who come to venerate the anchorite will never understand. While some women chose this life, a path of ultimate devotion, many did not. This cell, this living tomb, is part of a system, a perfect, silent way to dispose of a problem. When the tithes became too much, when the Lord's demands bent backs to the breaking point, a new fresco would be commissioned. It is propaganda, forged in egg tempera and fear, designed to manufacture obedience. Your skin crawls, not from the painted demons, but from the cold, brilliant clarity of the truth. This has nothing to do with God. This is about controlling your body. A terrified population doesn't question why the Lord's granary is full while their children starve. A terrified population doesn't whisper forbidden ideas around the fire at night. What they don't want you to know is that royal edicts, for nearly a century, tried to make this illegal. They tried to limit who could own a bow, who could practice. They knew that an army of knights was a tool of control. But a nation of archers is a nation of free men. It's the same tactic used by every tyrant in history. To keep power, you must first keep a monopoly on violence. The longbow threatened to break that monopoly forever. As he helps you knock another arrow, his sleeve rides up. A complex equation of steps and turns that, for centuries, was dismissed as a decorative flourish. A secret hidden in plain sight. Before he vanished forever into the footnotes of history, he laid the final stone, leaving behind a key for a future he could only pray would be wise enough to find it. And now, you are that future. Your lantern light falls upon the book resting on the pedestal. It is bound in simple, unadorned leather, cool and smooth to the touch. Your eyes trace the eroded carvings on the stone, the faded figures of forgotten gods. And then you see it, etched subtly into the stone, almost hidden by a patch of green slime, is a small, geometric symbol. It's the same one you saw carved into the hearthstone of the midwife's hut, the woman they call a heretic for her knowledge of herbs and healing. Here it is again, a whisper from a cleaner past, a secret hiding in plain sight. It's a ghost, a memory of a truth they tried to wash away with filth. They believe the boiling water will refuse to burn the flesh of an innocent man. What they don't know, what is only ever whispered in the darkest corners of taverns, is that the ordeal is a rigged game from the start. You learned the secret from a traveling monk, a man whose faith had been cracked open by what he'd seen. He told you of the salves, the secret preparations of mallow, fleabane, and egg white that a priest can apply to a favored man's skin beforehand, rendering it momentarily resistant to the heat. This is what they don't want you to know. This place of worship is also a machine, a silent, colossal instrument of stone and glass, designed to measure the heavens with a precision the Church has declared impossible and heretical. 99% of the souls who have shivered in this nave for generations see only the glory of God in the shafts of colored light. They don't realize they are standing inside one of the most accurate astronomical clocks ever conceived. An inconvenient wife who inherited too much land. A royal cousin who knew a dangerous secret about the line of succession. A daughter who refused a politically advantageous marriage. You don't execute them. That creates martyrs and questions. Instead, you sanctify them. You wall them up in the name of God, turning their prison into a shrine. The world sees a saint. The powerful see a loose end, neatly tied. You pull away from the wall, your heart a cold stone in your chest. They keep their heads down, their mouths shut, and pray for a mercy that will never come from men who wield fear like a weapon. 99% of the people shivering on this stone floor see a holy warning. You now see a threat. It is the exact same tactic used by empires that line roads with crucified rebels, or by modern news channels that use screaming headlines to shape how you think and what you fear. The technology changes. The manipulation is eternal. For a fleeting second, you see it on his wrist. A faded tattoo, dark against his skin. A strange geometric symbol. A series of intersecting lines inside a broken circle. He sees you notice, and his eyes harden for a moment before he pulls his sleeve down. The symbol feels ancient, a secret mark of a hidden brotherhood. He looks you in the eye. Again, he commands. They want you weak. They want you kneeling. Show them how wrong they are. The weight of it in your hands feels impossibly heavy, filled not just with paper and ink, but with the ghosts of Thomas, Ilara, and Guillaume. This is their final testament, the culmination of their resistance. With a trembling finger, you pry open the stiff cover. The pages release a dry, whispering sigh. The ink is a faded brown, but the script is clear, written in a precise, scholarly hand. But this isn't a history. It's not a gospel. The book doesn't open with a story.